there's a quiet truth that we don't talk about enough, the truth of what it feels like to witness someone who deserved better. Better care, better love, better support, better respect. And yet, instead of what they deserved, they received crumbs. They were met with silence where there should have been a voice, with indifference where there should have been compassion, and with harm where there should have been kindness. When we talk about someone deserving better, we're not just reflecting on what they didn't get. We're also acknowledging the systems, the choices, the fears, and the failures that made it so. It's never just about one person or one event. It's about all the ways we, as individuals and as a collective, fail to show up. We fail to be brave enough to give love freely. We fail to create environments where dignity is a baseline, not a luxury. And sometimes we fail to even see someone's worth. Not because it isn't there, but because we haven't practiced seeing deeply. The thing is, when someone deserves better, it's rarely because they ask for it. Deserving better isn't about demands or entitlement. It's about the undeniable value they carry simply by being human. It's the way they show up despite the odds, how they love despite their wounds, how they work despite the weight they carry. And when we fail to meet that, we fail not only them, but also the parts of ourselves that long to be better, to do better. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? To sit with the recognition of where we fell short, to name the ways we contributed to someone receiving less than what they needed. But discomfort is where growth begins. When we talk about someone deserving better, it's not just a simple statement of their unmet desires or their dissatisfaction with a situation. It's a deeper recognition of the core human need for dignity, respect, and belonging. Every person, regardless of their background, history, or circumstances, deserves to be treated with basic human decency. When we fail to meet that need, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we are not just denying them the things they want, we are denying them the fundamental respect they are entitled to as human beings. At its core, deserving better is a recognition of the gap between the care, attention, and love a person is entitled to and what they actually receive. It's a feeling that runs deep, stirring something in our hearts when we see someone not just receive less than what they deserve, but sometimes receive outright harm in the form of neglect, mistreatment, or indifference. This experience can be painfully evident in a number of ways. Perhaps it's a child who is raised in an environment that never affirms their worth, or an employee who tirelessly gives their best work, only to be overlooked or undervalued. It could be a woman who repeatedly silences her own needs to make room for others, never receiving the recognition or support she deserves in return. It might be someone who shows up for their family, friends, or community, always extending themselves, but never receiving the same level of care or consideration in return. The reality is that when someone deserves better, the feeling is often subtle and silent. It's not always loud, demanding, or angry. It's not always a dramatic moment of someone raising their voice or confronting others about how they've been mistreated. Instead, it often manifests as quiet sorrow, a kind of internalized sadness. They know they deserve better, they know they are worthy of more, but the world doesn't reflect that worth in the way they are treated. The unspoken feeling of unworthiness, paired with the understanding that something better could be their reality, can be a haunting experience. Over time, if not addressed, this sense of undeservedness can chip away at their sense of self and slowly erode their belief in their own value. Recognizing unmet needs also means acknowledging that there are often systemic barriers that contribute to these disparities. This isn't just a personal issue, a one-on-one failing in human interaction. Many times, these unmet needs are the result of larger social, economic, or cultural structures that uphold inequality, marginalize certain groups, and limit access to the resources and opportunities people need to thrive. Whether it's a pattern of gender bias in the workplace, racial discrimination that leads to unequal access to education and employment, or economic disparities that prevent people from getting the basic care they need. The structures of our society often leave people, particularly those from marginalized or underserved communities, without the opportunities they deserve. When a person does not have their basic needs met, it creates a ripple effect that spreads into other areas of their life. The absence of adequate care or support can undermine their mental and emotional well-being, leading to stress, burnout, and a diminished sense of self-worth. The feeling that I deserve better becomes a constant internal narrative that highlights the disconnect between their lived experience and their inherent worth as human beings. The gap between expectation and reality can create a sense of powerlessness, of not having control over their own circumstances, and of being unable to change the narrative of their own life. For those who see this happening, for those who witness the treatment of others, the need to recognize the deeper significance of this unmet need is vital. To see someone deserving better is not simply to say they should get more. It is to ask, why has this person been denied what is inherently theirs? It is to understand that when someone is not receiving what they need, whether it is love, care, respect, or recognition, it is a loss that goes beyond that person's immediate emotional or material needs. It is a loss that affects the very fabric of human connection, the integrity of relationships, and the moral and ethical structure of the systems we create. In these moments, we need to pause and reflect not just on the individual situation, but on the ways in which we as a community, culture, society have contributed to the circumstances that have left them feeling less than what they truly deserve. It's an invitation to recognize the larger forces at play, forces that often prioritize certain groups over others, that reward certain behaviors over others, and that reinforce systems that create inequality rather than equity. In everyday life, this recognition of unmet needs plays out in subtle ways. A person who continues to give, to care, to show up for others, and yet feels that their needs are continually dismissed or ignored is a heartbreaking reality. The person who has supported their friends, their family, their colleagues, and their community, only to find themselves without the same care in return, may begin to internalize this pattern of neglect. Over time, they may even start to question whether they are worth the effort, worth the time, or worth the care. This is the profound danger of failing to meet people's basic needs for love, respect, and dignity. Over time, it wears down the spirit, leaving behind a person who feels not only deprived of the things they deserve, but also disconnected from their sense of self. But recognizing unmet needs is not just about identifying the pain. It is also about fostering an awareness that opens the door to change. We must ask ourselves what it means to truly show up for one another, to give not only what is easy or convenient, but also what is necessary. It is about understanding that we are all interconnected, that no one person's suffering is isolated from the collective whole. The failure to meet one person's needs is a collective failure to recognize the humanity in all of us. And as uncomfortable as it may be to face the reality of unmet needs, this recognition holds incredible power for growth, healing, and transformation. It is the first step toward addressing not just individual pain, but collective healing. When we recognize that someone deserves better, we are also recognizing our responsibility in creating the conditions for a world where all people have the care, love, and respect they deserve. It is only through this acknowledgement that we can begin to create the kinds of relationships, systems, and communities where no one feels left behind, where no one feels undeserving. And in this recognition, we take the first step in changing not only the lives of individuals, but the very fabric of society itself. When we talk about someone deserving better, we are not simply acknowledging their individual struggle. We are addressing a much larger issue, one that is deeply embedded in our social, cultural, and institutional systems. The failure to provide someone with what they truly deserve is rarely an isolated incident. It is often a result of broader systemic issues. It is these systems, the structures of power, privilege, and societal norms that shape the way we interact with one another, often in ways that perpetuate inequality, harm, and neglect. At the heart of this is a failure to recognize and address the social dynamics that underpin the way people are treated, particularly those who have historically been marginalized. When we fail to meet someone's basic human needs, be it emotional support, physical safety, or opportunities for growth, we are not just failing them as individuals. We are reinforcing a system that undervalues certain groups of people, often based on factors like gender, race, socioeconomic status, ability, or other intersecting identities. This is a critical aspect to understand. Systemic failures do not occur in a vacuum, and they are not accidental. They are embedded in the very structures of our society. These systems are often invisible, deeply entrenched, and resistant to change. They are designed to maintain the status quo, which means that the people who benefit most from these systems often fail to see the harm they cause. The impact of these failures is particularly acute for those who already face multiple layers of oppression. For example, a woman of color may experience discrimination not only because of her gender, but also because of her race, resulting in a compounded effect of bias and marginalization that is rarely addressed. Similarly, someone living in poverty may not only struggle with a lack of resources, but also face societal attitudes that devalue their worth, further exacerbating their challenges. Understanding the scope of these systemic failures is crucial if we are to create a world where everyone truly gets what they deserve. This requires us to look beyond individual acts of kindness or generosity and examine the structures that perpetuate inequality. It is not enough to simply acknowledge the wrongs of the past or present. We must be willing to confront and dismantle the systems that create these disparities. One of the most pervasive systems at play is the economic system, which disproportionately impacts those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. Those who are most in need of support often lack access to the resources that could help them break free from cycles of poverty, violence, or neglect. Healthcare, education, affordable housing, and access to basic human rights are often out of reach for the most vulnerable. The result is a system that perpetuates inequity, leaving people without the tools they need to thrive. And when individuals don't have the resources or opportunities to meet their basic needs, it's not just an individual failure, it's a failure of the system to provide what is necessary for everyone to succeed. Another critical aspect of systemic failure is the justice system, which too often fails to provide equitable treatment to all. People from marginalized communities, whether based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or other factors, are often disproportionately impacted by unfair policies, discriminatory practices, and a lack of access to legal representation. This results in a system that does not adequately protect those who need it most. When justice is unevenly applied, and when some people are unfairly penalized or excluded, it sends a powerful message that they do not deserve equal treatment or protection under the law. The education system is another place where systemic failures manifest. Access to quality education is often determined by the wealth and resources of a family, the neighborhood they live in, and the school they attend. Children from low-income families or marginalized communities often attend schools with fewer resources, less experienced teachers, and fewer opportunities for academic and extracurricular enrichment. This perpetuates a cycle of disadvantage where those who need the most support are left behind. A system that prioritizes standardized testing over individualized care, or that fails to address the unique needs of every student, risks neglecting the potential of many children who could otherwise thrive. The unequal distribution of educational resources is one of the most insidious forms of systemic failure, as it not only limits opportunities but also shapes the future of entire generations. The healthcare system, too, is a prime example of how systemic failures play out in real life. In many parts of the world, access to healthcare is a privilege, not a right. Those without adequate insurance or resources often go without the care they need, leading to a wide range of preventable illnesses and health disparities. Furthermore, certain communities, particularly communities of color, often face systemic discrimination within healthcare settings, resulting in substandard care or outright denial of services. The result is a system that fails to prioritize the health and well-being of all individuals, leaving some people to suffer unnecessarily. These systemic failures are not just theoretical or abstract concepts. They are lived experiences for countless individuals who are forced to navigate a world that does not value their humanity in the same way it values others. The impact of these failures is often felt in ways that are invisible to those who are not directly affected. It can be seen in the exhaustion of someone who has fought their entire life for what others take for granted, in the trauma of someone who has been denied the support they needed to heal, or in the silent resignation of someone who has learned not to expect better because it never comes. But we must also acknowledge the ways in which these systems are not only harmful but are actively designed to maintain inequality. The structures that perpetuate these failures are often built on ideologies of power, control, and fear. They operate under the belief that some people are inherently more deserving than others. This belief underpins much of the discrimination and prejudice that continues to shape our world. Whether it's the belief that some races are more capable than others, that women are less competent than men, or that people with disabilities are less valuable than those who are able-bodied. These systems are based on ideas that actively dehumanize and marginalize people. To address these systemic failures, we must be willing to engage in uncomfortable conversations about power, privilege, and inequality. We must acknowledge the ways in which we as individuals and as a society are complicit in perpetuating systems that deny others what they deserve. This is not easy work. It requires humility, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about the way things are and the way they have been for far too long. But without this honest reckoning, we cannot begin to dismantle the systems that allow these failures to continue. Understanding systemic failures is a call to action. It challenges us to look beyond the surface and ask ourselves why certain people always seem to fall through the cracks while others continue to thrive. It challenges us to question the structures that perpetuate inequality and to work toward building a world where everyone has access to the opportunities, resources, and support they deserve. In a world that often equates deserving with asking, it's important to separate the concept of deserving better from the idea of entitlement. This distinction is crucial because so many people, especially women, are taught to minimize their needs, ignore their worth, and forego the right to ask for what they deserve. The underlying assumption in this dynamic is that wanting more, asking for what you truly need or desire, is somehow wrong, selfish, or entitled. But deserving better isn't about demanding more or seeking to claim what isn't ours. It's about recognizing and honoring what is already inherent: our right to be seen, to be heard, and to be treated with dignity. This idea that deserving better is not about entitlement calls for a deeper understanding of worth. The concept of entitlement in its negative sense is often tied to the idea that someone has an exaggerated sense of self-importance, or that they believe they are deserving of something just because they want it. It's often used as a label to dismiss a person's needs and desires, making them seem unreasonable or ungrateful. This view fosters a culture where people, particularly those who have been marginalized, are afraid to express their needs, because doing so risks being labeled as entitled, demanding, or even undeserving. But when we shift the conversation from entitlement to worth, we begin to see a different picture. Deserving better is not about self-indulgence or expecting others to bend to our every whim. It's about the universal truth that all humans, simply by virtue of being human, deserve respect, kindness, understanding, and care. Deserving better is rooted in the belief that everyone has an inherent dignity, a value that is not contingent on what they can give or produce, but simply because they exist. It's not about wanting more, it's about acknowledging the basic rights and needs that should be met for every person. The culture of self-sacrifice has been ingrained in many of us, especially in women. We are often taught to give until it hurts, to put others first, and to downplay our own needs and desires. The message is clear: putting others' needs above our own is virtuous, while wanting more for ourselves is selfish. This creates a paradox in which people are conditioned to accept less than they deserve, because they are taught to prioritize others' needs over their own. This mentality isn't only about individual choices, it's a reflection of the larger societal structure that values productivity over well-being, appearance over authenticity, and output over self-care. Women, in particular, are often expected to give endlessly to others, whether it's in the form of emotional labor, unpaid work, or caregiving, and to do so quietly and without complaint. We are socialized to think that our value is derived from what we give, how much we do for others, and how little we ask for ourselves. But this constant self-sacrifice isn't sustainable. It's rooted in the idea that we are somehow less deserving of care or consideration. Over time, this can erode self-worth, leading individuals to accept less than they deserve and believe that their needs are secondary, not as important as the needs of others. Yet, this sacrifice doesn't lead to fulfillment. It leads to exhaustion, burnout, and a profound sense of disconnect from one's own needs. Deserving better isn't about receiving grand gestures or material gifts. It's about being treated with respect, love, and dignity in all of our relationships. When we talk about someone deserving better, we are acknowledging that no one should be subjected to emotional neglect, mistreatment, or abuse. These basic elements: respect, kindness, care, are not luxuries. They are essential for human thriving. It's easy to overlook these fundamental needs when we live in a world that often prioritizes achievement and productivity. We are encouraged to work hard, push ourselves to the limit, and constantly perform. But in doing so, we can lose sight of the fact that our humanity is not defined by what we do, but by who we are. And who we are, at our core, deserves love, respect, and the opportunity to show up authentically in the world. When we see someone who deserves better, we are seeing the misalignment between their intrinsic worth and how they are being treated. This misalignment can manifest in many ways. Perhaps they are not being listened to. Perhaps their voice is being silenced. Or perhaps their contributions are being undervalued. Whatever the form, it is clear that they are not being treated in a way that honors their dignity, their humanity, and their inherent value. To deserve better is to accept that we are worthy of being treated with kindness and respect, regardless of what we produce or give. Deserving better isn't about asking for something beyond our rights, but rather it's about advocating for the things that every person is entitled to, things like empathy, understanding, and care. It also requires us to challenge the systems and cultural norms that perpetuate the idea that people should tolerate mistreatment, dismiss their needs, or downplay their worth. These systems, whether they be in families, workplaces, or broader societal structures, often operate on the assumption that individuals don't deserve better, that their suffering is to be tolerated, or that their needs should be minimized. But deserving better calls for a shift in how we view the world. It requires a paradigm shift that acknowledges that people are not commodities to be used and discarded, but human beings with inherent value. It's about recognizing that asking for more doesn't make someone entitled, it simply makes them human. When we accept that deserving better isn't about entitlement, we also open up the space for healing. Healing can't happen in a world where people are denied their basic needs, where they are told they don't deserve love, care, or respect. Healing begins when we start to recognize our own worth and the worth of others. When we start to give ourselves permission to want and expect better, we begin to create a world where everyone's needs are acknowledged and respected. Healing comes when we stop tolerating less than what we deserve, when we stop saying, "It's okay, I don't need that," or "It's fine, I can handle it," and instead start speaking up for our needs and boundaries. When we let go of the idea that asking for what we need makes us selfish, we can step into a more authentic, compassionate way of being. Healing happens when we stop measuring our value by what we give and start recognizing that we offer deserving of love and respect, simply because we exist. Deserving better isn't about entitlement. It's about recognizing that every individual has an inherent worth that should be honored. It's about acknowledging that people deserve to be treated with respect, dignity, and kindness, not because they ask for it or demand it, but because they are human. The cultural shift toward recognizing this truth is essential for healing and creating a world where people can show up authentically, unapologetically, and deserving of all the care and compassion they need. At the core of every individual is an innate strength, a deep-rooted resilience that often goes unnoticed or underappreciated. It's not the loudest or most visible strength, but it's their quiet, steady, and unwavering. This strength is the foundation upon which people continue to show up, continue to love, continue to work, despite the circumstances that might otherwise break them. When we talk about someone deserving better, we're also talking about that inner fortitude. We're talking about the grace they carry with them, even when the world doesn't offer the same in return. We're talking about their ability to keep moving forward in the face of uncertainty, in the face of neglect, and sometimes even in the face of outright harm. It's easy to look at someone's life, particularly when it's marked by hardship or struggle, and assume that they are defined by their challenges. We see them through the lens of their difficulties, whether they are personal, professional, or societal, and believe that this is who they are. But what we often fail to see is that the challenges they face don't define them. Rather, it's how they rise in spite of them. It's their ability to endure, to show up, and to continue making meaningful contributions, even when the world doesn't seem to acknowledge it. This strength is often invisible. It's not the kind of strength that is easily measured by metrics or accolades. It's not celebrated in the way that external accomplishments are. And yet, it's the most profound kind of strength because it comes from a place that's deeply personal, deeply human. It's the quiet resilience that is forged in the depths of adversity. And for many, it's a strength that is honed over time, built through years of personal struggle, growth, and at times, suffering. The people who deserve better often possess this resilience. They don't demand it, they don't seek attention for it. It's simply who they are. They carry on even when their contributions go unnoticed. They love, even when their love is unreciprocated. They work tirelessly, even when they are underpaid or undervalued. And they do all of this not because they expect rewards, but because it is part of who they are. They are human, and being human means showing up, even in the most difficult of circumstances. But here's the thing. This resilience doesn't mean they are invincible. It doesn't mean they don't feel the pain of being overlooked or ignored. It doesn't mean that they aren't impacted by the harm that comes from not being treated with the respect they deserve. That's the myth we often tell ourselves, that people who are resilient or who continue to push forward are somehow immune to hurt. They're not. They feel the sting of injustice, the weight of disregard, and the loneliness that comes from being unseen. The difference is that, even in the face of all of that, they continue. This is a difficult truth to grapple with because it challenges us to look beyond the surface. It requires us to see not just the external actions of a person, but the quiet strength they carry within. We are often more comfortable recognizing achievements, accolades, and visible signs of success because they fit neatly into our definitions of worth. But the true measure of a person's strength lies in their ability to continue moving forward, to love despite the hurt, to serve despite the exhaustion, to give despite the lack. We often fail to appreciate this resilience because we haven't practiced truly seeing people. We haven't developed the ability to look beyond the surface and acknowledge the silent battles that others are fighting every day. We see the end result, the accomplishments, or failures, and we fail to recognize the strength it took to get there. But what if we began to look deeper? What if we started to see not just what people achieve, but the courage it takes to show up in the first place? For those who deserve better, This unseen strength is both a gift and a burden. It's a gift because it allows them to keep going, to keep fighting for what they believe in, even when the world doesn't see them. It's a burden because it can be exhausting to constantly give love and show up without receiving the same in return. The burden of this kind of resilience is that it often goes unnoticed. People may take it for granted, assuming that because someone continues to show up, they are fine, that they are capable of handling whatever comes their way. But the reality is that this resilience is often accompanied by deep, unspoken needs. Needs for validation, for support, for kindness, for care. When these needs are ignored or dismissed, the person can begin to feel invisible. They might begin to question whether their worth is tied only to their ability to endure. This is where the human element becomes truly significant. Recognizing the resilience of others isn't just about acknowledging their strength. It's about recognizing that they deserve to have their needs met. It's about understanding that they are more than the sum of their struggles. They are more than the work they do or the love they give. They are human beings with inherent value, deserving of compassion, understanding, and respect. And when we fail to meet that need, we perpetuate the cycle of neglect that reinforces the idea that they must endure without question. To truly recognize and honor this human element, we must first acknowledge that strength is not the absence of need. It's the courage to continue even in the face of overwhelming odds. We must learn to see people for who they truly are, not just as a reflection of their resilience, but as individuals who are worthy of care, connection, and community. By doing so, we begin to create spaces where people can show up not just with their strength, but with their vulnerability. We create spaces where they can receive the care and respect they deserve. We create environments where it's not just about enduring, but about thriving. And in doing so, we honor the humanity in all of us, and we stop expecting people to simply carry on when they deserve so much more. In the end, the true power of resilience is not that it allows someone to continue despite everything. The true power lies in our ability to recognize that resilience, to honor it, and to respond with the care and love that those who deserve better have always needed. It's not just about the strength to keep going. It's about creating a world where that strength is met with the recognition, compassion, and respect it truly deserves. At the heart of every interaction, every relationship, and every community lies a fundamental need for compassion and dignity. Yet, these two qualities are often underappreciated, sidelined, or taken for granted. Compassion is more than just a passing feeling of sympathy. It's an active, conscious choice to engage with someone's pain or struggles with empathy, understanding, and the intention to alleviate suffering. Dignity, on the other hand, is the recognition of a person's intrinsic value, regardless of their status, circumstances, or what they can offer. It's about treating every individual as deserving of respect, autonomy, and fairness, not because of their achievements or social standing, but because they are human. When we say she deserved better, we are often pointing to the absence of these two essential elements, compassion and dignity. How often have we seen situations where someone was treated with indifference, ignored, or diminished? It could be in a professional setting where a colleague's ideas are disregarded. It could be in personal relationships where one person is expected to give more than they receive, yet their emotional and physical needs are neglected. It could be in communities where certain groups are marginalized, their rights overlooked, and their humanity denied. These situations are not always obvious at first. Often they emerge gradually through small actions, microaggressions, or systemic practices that erode one's sense of self-worth. When compassion and dignity are missing, people begin to feel unseen and unheard. This lack of recognition and understanding can leave a deep scar, one that isn't easily healed by empty words or hollow promises. The absence of compassion makes people question whether their suffering matters, while the absence of dignity makes them wonder if they are even worthy of care. Over time, this wears down the spirit, creating a cycle of shame, isolation, and self-doubt. The need for compassion is universal, yet it is something that we often neglect, especially in high-stress environments, competitive settings, or even personal relationships where power dynamics come into play. When we look around at the way people are treated, we can sometimes feel the weight of that neglect. Someone, perhaps someone we love or admire, might be struggling, but they are met with coldness or a lack of empathy. That person deserves better. They deserve compassion, not just when it's convenient or easy, but especially when they are vulnerable, tired, or at their lowest. The choice to show compassion is not a passive one. It requires intentionality and effort. It means being present, not just in the easy moments, but in the difficult ones too. It means sitting with someone's pain without trying to fix it immediately, simply offering them the comfort of knowing they are not alone in it. Compassion calls us to be present with people as they are, without judgment or expectation of change. It's about bearing witness to their humanity, seeing their struggles as valid, and acknowledging that their emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, deserve to be respected. It's easy to get caught up in our own lives, our own needs, and our own struggles. But true compassion requires us to momentarily step outside of ourselves and extend ourselves to others. This doesn't mean we must solve their problems, but it does mean we take the time to understand their experience and meet them where they are. By doing so, we affirm their dignity, giving them space to be vulnerable and real without the fear of being judged or diminished. Dignity, on the other hand, is the recognition of a person's inherent worth. In a world where status and success often define value, we forget that dignity is not something that is earned or deserved based on what we have or do. It is the birthright of every human being, and it cannot be taken away. When we treat people with dignity, we acknowledge that they are whole, worthy, and valuable just as they are. We affirm their right to exist in the world on their own terms, free from the dehumanizing forces that seek to strip them of their agency and power. The importance of dignity is often most evident in the moments when people are at their lowest. How we treat others when they are struggling, whether it's emotionally, financially, or physically, reveals much about our commitment to their humanity. Dignity does not turn away from those who are suffering. It holds them with respect and care, understanding that their worth is not diminished by their circumstances. It does not allow shame to creep in. Instead, it empowers individuals by affirming that they are not defined by their failures, their vulnerabilities, or their mistakes. They are defined by their capacity to grow, to change, and to persist. In a world that is increasingly driven by competition, comparison, and the pursuit of success, dignity becomes a radical act. It is a choice to see the humanity in everyone we encounter, to honor their value regardless of what they contribute or how they appear. When dignity is present, people feel seen, heard, and respected. They feel safe to show up as themselves, to share their thoughts and ideas, to ask for help when they need it, and to experience both joy and sorrow without fear of rejection or judgment. It provides the foundation for deep, meaningful connections built on mutual respect and trust. Unfortunately, dignity is often eroded in environments that prioritize efficiency, output, or conformity over humanity. In workplaces that demand performance at all costs. In relationships that are transactional rather than emotional. And in systems that dehumanize rather than uplift, dignity is sacrificed for convenience. But when we strip away someone's dignity, we strip them of their ability to truly be themselves, to experience life authentically, and to find connection with others. We rob them of their most basic right, the right to be treated as a full and complete person, deserving of the same respect we wish for ourselves. To create a world where people receive the compassion and dignity they deserve, we must begin by examining our own actions. Are we present with others in their moments of need, or are we too consumed by our own busyness? Do we listen to others with genuine empathy, or are we quick to dismiss their pain? What do we show up for those who are struggling, or do we avoid them because their challenges make us uncomfortable? Are we treating others with the respect and recognition they deserve? Not just because they have earned it, but because they are inherently valuable. We must also begin to examine the systems we participate in. Are they designed to uplift and honor individuals, or do they perpetuate cycles of harm and neglect? Do they encourage compassion and dignity, or do they breed competition, fear, and marginalization? The work of creating a more compassionate and dignified world starts with us, in our everyday choices and interactions, and extends to the larger structures we build and participate in. It requires us to be brave enough to question the status quo, to stand up for what is right, and to hold space for those who are most vulnerable. When we show compassion and dignity to others, we not only help them feel valued, but we also nurture our own capacity for empathy and kindness. These qualities are contagious. They create ripples that extend beyond one person, shaping the culture and the world around us. The more we practice compassion and dignity, the more we encourage others to do the same, creating a community where everyone is seen, heard, and treated with the respect they deserve. In a world that often feels divided, fragmented, and broken, compassion and dignity offer us the possibility of connection, healing, and growth. These are the qualities that allow us to recognize the inherent value in each person, to meet them where they are, and to help them find their way to a place of belonging, support, and care. They are the antidote to the harm that results when we forget that every single person deserves better. Growth is a concept that is often misunderstood. It's frequently associated with smooth, easy paths or visible success. We tend to think of growth as something that happens when everything is going according to plan, when we're climbing toward an ideal, or when the outcome is certain. But growth, in its truest form, happens in moments of discomfort. It happens when we allow ourselves to feel the discomfort of a situation, and instead of avoiding or numbing it, we sit with it, examine it, and let it teach us. When we talk about someone who deserved better, the discomfort we feel can be powerful. It may make us feel guilty, helpless, or frustrated. But in these moments of discomfort lies the potential for significant transformation, not just for the person who has been wronged, but also for ourselves. Sitting with the discomfort of realizing that someone didn't get what they deserve forces us to confront our own roles in perpetuating injustice, harm, and neglect. It forces us to face our own shortcomings, and if we are brave enough to do so, it invites us to change. Our natural inclination when faced with discomfort is to escape it. We find ways to avoid the tough conversations, the hard truths, and the moments that challenge us to grow. We busy ourselves, distract ourselves, and shift focus so we don't have to reckon with the hard realities in front of us. It's easier to stay in our comfortable, familiar spaces than to venture into the unknown terrain of self-reflection and growth. But it's precisely within that discomfort, within those difficult, painful realizations, that we find the possibility for real, meaningful change. Discomfort is where vulnerability meets growth. It's about being open to the idea that we don't have all the answers, that we may have failed someone in ways we weren't even aware of, and that there's always more to learn. The discomfort doesn't mean we're wrong or bad, it means we're human. It means we've reached a point where we can examine our actions and choices with honesty. If we deny this discomfort, we deny ourselves the opportunity to learn and evolve. But if we lean into it, we create space for self-awareness, empathy, and understanding. A common misconception about discomfort is that it's something to be feared or avoided at all costs. But discomfort, when approached with curiosity and an openness to change, is actually a catalyst for growth. It's the moment we realize we've fallen short of our values or our responsibilities. And in that realization, we find the seed of improvement. We may feel shame or guilt when we recognize that someone deserved better, but those feelings don't need to be immobilizing. Instead, they can be the energy that propels us toward more conscious action. Consider for a moment a situation in which someone was harmed or neglected. Maybe they were overlooked at work, ignored in a relationship, or dismissed by a community. When we witness this, the discomfort we feel is a reflection of our ability to recognize that something is wrong. But discomfort can also highlight something important: our own power to make things better. By choosing to confront the discomfort rather than bypass it, we open the door to both personal growth and collective change. We ask ourselves, how can I be better in the situation? What can I do differently moving forward? If we are willing to engage with our discomfort in meaningful ways, we begin to reshape the way we approach justice, empathy, and human connection. Discomfort doesn't have to be paralyzing, it can be transformative. Growth requires a willingness to face uncomfortable truths and learn from them. It's about having the courage to lean into those moments of vulnerability and asking the tough questions. What can I do better? How did I fail? What will I do next? In this way, discomfort becomes a tool for empathy. We can only truly empathize with someone else's pain, hurt, or disappointment if we are willing to sit with our own discomfort when we recognize that they were wronged. When we feel that discomfort, we are called to act not out of guilt, but out of a genuine desire to contribute to making things right. In this sense, discomfort leads us toward action, and that action is what makes growth possible. It may not always be easy, and it might not always be clear how to act, but discomfort is the beginning of the journey toward change. Growth through discomfort is not just about correcting past mistakes. It's also about refining who we are and how we show up in the world. It's about becoming more attuned to the needs of others and developing the emotional intelligence to navigate difficult situations with grace and compassion. We learn to be more patient, more understanding, and more committed to ensuring that others don't just survive, they thrive. This type of growth requires ongoing effort and attention. It's not a one-time event, a continuous practice of reflection, self-awareness, and conscious action. It's also important to recognize that growth through discomfort doesn't mean we have to carry the weight of guilt or shame indefinitely. Rather, it means we take responsibility for our role in the situation and use that awareness as a stepping stone to becoming a better version of ourselves. Growth isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about taking the lessons learned from the discomfort and applying them to our future choices. When we witness someone who deserved better, it's an invitation to examine our own behavior, our own practices, and our own choices. Are we doing enough to ensure that people are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve? Are we making space for others to be seen and heard? Are we holding ourselves accountable for the ways we contribute to the systems and environments that allow harm to persist? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary questions. If we are to truly make a difference in the lives of others, we must be willing to discomfort. Growth doesn't happen when everything is easy. It happens when we step outside of our comfort zones and face the truth, even when that truth is hard to swallow. By embracing discomfort, we move closer to becoming the people we aspire to be, people who show up for others, people who care, and people who are committed to making the world a better place for everyone.